So with that, I will call to order this edition of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission, and for today, which is the 20th of June, 2000.
I'm sorry, you're right.
That's all right. So the first thing we'll do is the roll call. I saw that.
Karen Kahn,
Present.
Kirk Martin, Craig Arcuri,
Here.
Carl Hopkins,
Here.
Bruce Miller, and Jim Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Okay. Item 1 is notices that on Thursday, June 14th, 2018 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board of Airport Administration. And that brings us to number 2, public comment. Any member of the public may address the Airport Commission on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled before them that same day. The total amount of time for the public comment will be 15 minutes, and no individual speaker may speak for more than 2 minutes. Do we have any speaker slips?
No speaker slips.
Okay. And with that, we move on to liaison reports, and I see our smiling City of Goleta Liaison Council member, Michael T. Bennett.
Well, actually, I have a couple of really exciting things that have occurred here since the last time we got together. The first item is that the City of Goleta has taken ownership. We have the keys of the old DRI warehouse since they're all moved out, and that's significant because we've also received a $13,009,000 grant, a TIRSIP grant, through the state of California from SB1 and cap and trade funds in cooperation with SB-CAG to build a multimodal transit center in that location. So we'll be moving forward with that now. We've got the funding, we've got the property, and it ought to be pretty exciting, and we do appreciate the cooperation of the airport and helping us along in that regard, and you've been very supportive of this. And the retimed train has been working. We're more on time today than we were on the first few weeks, which had a few bumps in the road, unfortunately. But I sit on the LOSAN Board of Directors and representing Santa Barbara County. And so this opportunity for us to improve our means of getting around is going to be just awesome. So I'm pretty excited. And I might say, in commenting on the Surfliner train, the Surfliner is, we have 14 new locomotives that are coming to us. We have 4 that are in Los Angeles right now, 2 being used for training, 2 that are going to be put into revenue service here pretty shortly. And we have also 6 additional train cars that are, they're used, but they're being refurbished, and they're going to be pretty awesome putting on the line as well. So we're going to be able to better serve our communities up and down the coast better than we are even now. So it's a pretty exciting time, actually. So thank you.
Great. May I make one request? And I'm sure it's already planned for, but just in case, as you plan your new transportation center, I'm hoping there will be some way to get from the center to the airport and vice versa, so that one can really use many means of transportation.
That actually has been discussed and is an ongoing discussion as to what that will ultimately look like. I'm not really sure. Right now, we have a contract with MTD, SB-CAG does, and when individuals get off the train, we have a bus that goes west on Hollister Avenue to Log Me In, which is almost adjacent to Elwood Elementary School. And then going east, we go all the way to Cottage Hospital at Patterson Avenue, dropping people off along the way for the commuters. So that's been incredibly successful. Everyone's pretty happy on how well that's working. And UCSB is parking shuttles over at the terminal at this particular time. And when they come up from Ventura County, they have access to the shuttle, so they can drive it over and put other UCSB, both staff, faculty, and students into the shuttles and transport over to the campus. So that's been incredibly successful. So we still need to work out a few things here for the airport, which I have confidence within your staff and our staff that'll ultimately come together.
Yeah, because we'd love to see ways to get from the airport into the transportation to the rest of the county, and to get people from the rest of the county to come to the airport through that center and not bring their car.
Well, we're almost there. We're getting real close.
All right, just don't forget us. We're
Uh,
here.
Trust me, that won't happen.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilman Bennett?
No.
Okay. And do I see Councilman Dominguez? Okay, if he appears later, we'll invite him to speak. So that completes liaison reports, and that moves us along to the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion to waive the reading of the minutes and approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Great. I've heard two firsts. How about a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The consent calendar is approved. And that brings us on to administrative reports. Item 9, transfer and appropriation of funds for construction of light industrial buildings at 6100 Hollister Avenue.
Yes, ma'am. This project has had a life of its own, I think. We've been talking about developing 6100 Hollister for several years, but so we can go to our, you'll recall that we sold the land to Direct Relief, received $8.7 million for that sale, and established the Airport Development Fund. And that fund was to design and construct the light industrial buildings along Hollister Avenue, and then also the revenue generated from that development fund, we agreed that we would split it between operations and put half of the money back into the development fund so that we could do future development, realizing that we probably couldn't do the whole thing at one time, the whole development at one time. And as this slide shows, that's the area in orange that we have left after the sale to Direct Relief for our industrial buildings. And that also included a new roadway to go from Love Place over to Frederick Lopez, Wallace Becknell. So the development includes the road, our portion, which is half of the cost of the road, the stormwater improvements along Hollister, which also takes the runoff from all of the road, not just half of it, but all of the road, and the sidewalk along Hollister Avenue. And we would have a total of, I think it was 9 buildings total. So we knew that we didn't have enough money to do the infrastructure portion and all 5 buildings. We didn't think we had funds sufficient for that. But we did go out to bid for the first phase, and we did include all of the buildings that are included in the first phase, those 5 buildings along Hollister starting at Love Place. And here's the data on the bids that we received. The base bid includes the infrastructure plus 2 buildings, and then we had an alternate for building 1, which is the smaller building on the corner of Lopez and Hollister, which we see as a light deli or a coffee shop sort of retail building. Then we did alternates for building 4 and 5 just to see what the cost would be. And as you can tell, the total cost for the whole thing would be $8.8 million and for Tomar, and then 11.9 for Lash. So based on the funds that we had available, we awarded a contract to Tomar for the base bid and alternate 1, building 1. So that's what we thought we were going to be able to do. And then we went through our budget hearing with the city administrator and the finance director in our review for fiscal year 19. And Paul said, you know, it's unfortunate that we can't just go ahead and do those other 2 buildings. And then the finance director said, well, we could probably work out a loan with the city. And not to be outdone, I said, that sounds like a great idea to me, and let's talk about it. So we did, and the city, we went to city council with the idea that we would transfer funds from the city's general fund reserves to the airport for the construction of Building 4 and 5 so that we complete that whole first phase of the development. We looked at a fair interest rate, which is 3.5%, we thought was fair. And then over a period of 9 years to pay it back. And we chose that based on the potential revenue for all 5 buildings. And the term was set with the 3% interest at 9 years. So then we went back to City Council with that proposal. They directed us to go to the Finance Committee to kind of hash out all the details. And we did that, and Finance Committee unanimously recommended to City Council that we enter into this transfer of funds. They don't like to call it a loan, but transfer of funds to the airport department. So by doing that, we will be able to complete all 5 buildings at that interest rate and have a 9-year term. And we also talked about capitalized interest, but I think we might delay actually getting the funds until we actually need to spend the money, which will also help on the repayment. But it would be repaid from the Airport Development Fund revenues with the Airport Operating Fund backing it up. So I wanted you to know that we are going to complete that whole phase 1 of our light industrial development. The other portion of the development plan will have to wait for future year funding.
Great, well, that's very good news. Any questions?
The payments on the transfer,
Mm-hmm.
those will come out of the half of the revenue that is going to operating? You mentioned it, sorry, go ahead.
I believe it will come out, first we'll generate the revenue from the rentals and pay the debt service.
Okay.
And then split, yes.
Thank you.
First we pay debt service.
If we have an economic downturn, have we done an analysis at what point we would be unable to service the debt? You know, if passenger loading turns down and rental income turns down.
We haven't completed an official sensitivity analysis to identify at what point we wouldn't be able to pay the debt, but based on our cash flow forecast for the next 5 years, and based on the reversion of the property at 495 South Fairview, the increase in rent for the airport from that alone puts in close to $2 million a year. So I think aviation side's going to be doing much better. And I know that our forecast starts showing significant revenue proceeds starting in like 2020, almost $800,000 falling to the bottom line. So I think it would have to be a huge recession to impact the repayment of these funds.
Yeah,
Not that it couldn't happen, but
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm feeling some unease about our national economy at this point. And I think within 60 days, we should probably know a little better which way it will go. And I could foresee it taking a fairly substantial downturn. And so being able to service the debt would be a concern that I would have.
Okay. We will take that certainly, and when Tom gets back next week, we'll look at numbers and figure in some scenarios that would reflect that type of a downturn.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I have maybe even more concern than that. That early slide showed that we got 8 million, and I thought that the cost for the building of the first 5 was also 8 million. But I presume that some of that difference there had been spent in getting us this far.
Part of that, and keep in mind, that's construction cost. We also had soft costs for design permitting,
Okay,
and we also paid for half of that road.
okay, so
So
that's
that's-
the difference.
That's the difference.
Okay,
Right.
so if we build the first 3 buildings
Mhm.
and are unable to lease them,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
we have no we have 3 empty buildings and no debt payment. And
Right.
it's not good because we're not collecting the revenue that we would hope for. But as you pointed out, the airport could survive without that. Even, you know, even under pretty bad circumstances, it wouldn't be a drag.
Right.
If we proceed this way for the next 9 years, I think it's, if I remember, $440,000 a year. Is that what our payment is? Did I remember that correctly?
It's,
The
we're
loan
borrowing
payment?
$3 million.
The loan payment per year.
I don't think I have that written
I thought it was in the
in our report.
report that it was.
Okay.
3.4 million. Yes, a debt service of 408,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so $408,000 a year. And I guess I'm very conservative fiscally person, but I would much prefer us to build the first 3 buildings, lease those 3 buildings. I haven't been told that light industrial is going to be easy to lease, but have we had any people calling us up asking to lease the space? I noticed there was a sign for lease up there for a while until they started construction. Have we got any pre-leases at this point?
We haven't attempted that at this point, not at all. But what I can tell you is that 2 of the major commercial real estate brokers in Santa Barbara County, both Stephen Hayes and Radius Group, have indicated to us that there has not been new light industrial buildings constructed in more than 30 years, and that there is a wait list for this size of property. That's why we undertook this endeavor to begin with.
I understand that that's what they have both said. Of course, if they're wrong,
Well,
we
and keep
lose,
in,
they don't.
and Carl, keep in mind too that we have the niche for the airport has always been small light industrial.
Right.
It's going to have an office, a restroom, and a roll-up back door. That's been our niche in the community forever. And these will be, we've also worked with UCSB in their entrepreneurial program. They're very interested in the property. So we didn't take this under construction without forethought.
I understand. Was involved in some of the early subcommittee meetings. And I thought the idea of building the 3 buildings, although frankly, if you were going to build 3 buildings, I'd build 2, 3, and 4 and leave off 1, the retail, since there seems to be a glut of retail. I mean, over at least in Cayreal, there's a lot of vacancies. But I felt very comfortable with the idea that we build 3 with the cash we've got. We save up cash until we have enough to build another 1 or 2 or whatever it is and do that, and then continue until we've built out completely. I don't feel nearly as comfortable or comfortable at all with borrowing to build those other 2, at least until we have the first ones leased, or significant, effort in those leases. As Jim pointed out, we've seen the economy tank in a very, very short time back in 2007 and 8. The first thing that's going to happen in an economic downturn is we're going to lose routes, we're going to lose airlines, we're going to lose size of airplanes, all of which can hurt. We may lose tenants. So I just am not comfortable with the loan. I'm very comfortable in proceeding with the cash for the first 3. Although, as I said, I would consider doing 2, 3, and 4 and leaving the retail space unless we can get somebody right up front to go for it. But I can't support the loan. I would recommend that we not borrow the money, that we continue with the original proposal.
Anyone else? I have a question regarding the economy of scale for building them all at once versus doing phase one and then later phase two. Was that studied, or was there a savings incorporated with doing them all together?
There is definitely a savings. We currently have all of the plans and specifications completed for all 9 buildings. There's an economy of scale when you have the same contractor on the site doing the same site work and putting in utilities. It's all it is an economy of scale. So that was thought about as well.
Was there any number proposed? I mean, I don't know that you went so far as to ask them to bid it as 2 separate things, since trying to get somebody to bid something in the future is tough. But did we get any kind of notion that you would save approximately 10-15% on building out the others now?
I'm sure the engineers took that into consideration when they actually put it out for bid a second time. But it has gone out to bid.
We don't have those bids back yet, so we don't know that the same contractor will win.
Yes, we do have the bids back, and we do have the same contractor.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, this is really a two-sided coin, and what we're saving, we're buying with the gamble on the economy. And so it's, which is more likely? The economy to turn down, we have trouble making debt service, or we save the money? And that's a tough call. But I think that we should understand how much downturn in the economy we could stand before the debt service becomes a problem.
That is certainly a consideration, and I know when we went through the downturn before, the airport had a balanced budget, and we also put money away in reserves, and we have full reserves currently. So that does give us an edge of protection. 25% of our budget is sitting in cash.
I wouldn't expect you to have, I understand my colleagues on the commission's concern. I don't share it. I don't share it just based on my experience, but and partially to assuage that or look at that, and I wouldn't expect you to have this information off the top of your head, but those of us in business who lived through the 2009 meltdown, which I view certainly in my lifetime as the most significant recession I had ever. Seeing building after building after building empty. I mean, it was really a depression up in Silicon Valley. So I would envision that as pretty close to a worst case scenario, and having done business here in the airport for pretty much that entire time as well, we must have historical data on occupancy, and I'd be curious to know what our occupancy numbers were in 2009 and 2010. We certainly experienced a drop in airside revenue because the airlines pulled back because people weren't traveling. But I wonder how that affected our real estate, which is somewhat of a different animal, because we're not renting that stuff to travelers. We're renting it to businesses, which certainly were hurt in the recession. Do you have a sense of what our occupancy was during 9 and 10?
Our occupancy continues to be between 95 and 98% full. It was even during the Depression. And the one thing that Commission might recall is that we came back to Commission and asked to lower some of the rents for our tenants because they were going through a bad time. We did that, but we still maintained almost 100% occupancy.
That was during the 2009, 2010, which
I can get the property management reports for that period for each one of them.
That might help. I mean, I understand the concerns about debt, and I share an overall general concern about the global economy. And from my perspective in the business dealings I do globally today, on the other hand, I would view that period as if not the worst case scenario, pretty darn close.
Mhm.
And if we went from 95% occupancy down to 40% or 60% occupancy, and we call that the low watermark, then I think those concerns take on much more significance. I think and if you chart the occupancy during that time versus airside revenue, I think what you're gonna see, and I remember this myself, I believe, is airside revenue went down
Mhm.
drastically, and the occupancy basically stayed flat,
Yeah.
as far as I know. So that would assuage my fears.
Mhm.
I do share the feeling that, the economy's on this kind of, should still do great, or, maybe it's gonna be a really tough couple of years. But, having done business here in the county for many, several decades, it's really tough to find property like that, and I do recognize that being a sweet spot for the airport.
Mhm.
And if the occupancy numbers back that up during that period of time, I think that would go a long way to maybe addressing the concerns that have been expressed, which I respect. I understand.
What is assuming those first 3 buildings were leased, what is our annual income expected from those 3?
I believe the revenue that Tom was showing in one of the slides, Dan, if you can go back to. There is one that has it. Okay, so 3 buildings, there is a slide for a 15-year financial impact. Operating fund revenues, 2.2 million. 5 buildings proposed would be an additional 2 million. Development fund revenues, 2.6, and then 5.5, as you can see, less debt service of 3.7. So the total development fund would have 2.6 or 1.8. Total overall revenues, 4.8 or 7.5 million. So you gain substantially by having the 5 buildings. And we're not talking, quite frankly, about that many square feet of development. The whole development,
could
including
you go-
9 buildings, is 47,000 square feet, and this is about 20,000 square feet.
Could you go back to that other slide? Yeah, that one.
I think the other thing that's of interest is that, of course, these have been designed to satisfy the types of tenants we know that we have who
Mhm.
continually ask for space, as opposed to having to rent to a market that says, I want this, and they come to you, and we have certain fixed buildings, and, we do our best to divide them up. But I'm assuming,
Yes.
that this has been designed to attract the kind of people who we most find are looking for space. It's not quite like the 495 South Fairview building, which is kind of an elephant in that it needs to have certain types of tenants. I think you've probably got a much wider variety of potential customers.
Correct. It's not taking a World War II building and remodeling it and trying to bring it up to code. That's correct.
Well, if we would be okay with the 2008, 2010 revenues plus what we would get from the 3 buildings, we should be okay with 5 buildings, but would we be able to service the debt at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I still believe that we would.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the 2008, 2010 period is a reasonable low mark to assume in our revenues.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be adding some more rental space here, and based on our past experience with rentals, we should say that, yeah, we probably can rent that.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to be sure that we can service the debt
Certainly.
at that revenue level.
Mm-hmm.
What is the projected completion date for phase 1 and 3, or would they be put into service as they become available, or would it wait until all of it was done?
That's an engineering question, but they're all being constructed at one time. So when they pour the slab for one, they'll pour the slab for the other, do the parking and the lighting, the electrical, all of that. And Leaf Reynolds has indicated that he thinks it'll be ready by springtime next year.
Any other questions? And this is just a informational, so you don't have a recommendation. Okay.
But I will take your comments to City Council.
The recommendation.
I guess I reached for the green button and pulled back a couple of times. I don't know if it's inappropriate to ask Council Member Bennett, being here in Goleta, I know it's really not designed to be an interactive conversation, but low, medium, high, your feeling on light industrial buildings of this size, and from the City of Goleta's experience perspective in terms of availability and need, supply and demand. Any comments?
Yeah, my expectation based on input that we receive, they don't exist, and there's an incredible strong desire to have them.
Sounds like we might raise the price.
Well, that's certainly reassuring.
I would just comment, as I said earlier, I can't support it alone. I also had just now noticed that this was a received report. I wish it had been a recommendation to the City Council as opposed to just receive a report. I think it would have been appropriate to bring it to this commission for our recommendation and approval to forward to the City Council, not just as a report.
Mm-hmm. I understand that, and I will take your comments to City Council when we actually, when Council considers the transfer of funds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Okay, that brings us to item number 10, which is the airport marketing program update.
Yes, Deanna's going to lead it off and then introduce our consultants.
Alrighty, good evening, Madam Chair and Commission. I'm pretty excited this evening. We're all excited to have our marketing communications team with us this evening. They're with us. Kim Hiltack and Chris Vargas are here from Hiltack Marketing Group. They're an aviation-focused marketing group based out of Sacramento. And representing our local talent is Erin Lynch. She is with Blaze PR, helps us with some of our media relations work. We've been working with this team for well over a year now, and there's really two significant benefits that we gain from this partnership. One is that, as you might suspect, our marketing dollars, our budget, especially for advertising purchases, is pretty small. And so it's really key for us to stretch those dollars as best we can with effective messages that reach the target audiences that we have identified, that gets people on planes, and that's really the bottom line. They help us stretch that budget. The second real strong benefit is that, as I think we are all aware, the advertising sphere, the world of advertising, has changed tremendously, even in the last 5 years, let alone the last 10 years, with the invention of social media and those types of electronic avenues for advertising. And these folks, they live and breathe it every day, and that's really the key to it. They understand the changes that are happening and are able to help us take advantage of great opportunities as they develop in the marketplace. So with that, I'm going to let Kim take the podium, and hope you enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Deanna. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And we are excited to share the marketing recap and let you all know what we've been up to for the past 12 months or so. So I'll start by giving you just a little bit more info. Deanna, that was such a lovely introduction. We were delighted to respond to the RFQ and then be invited to partner with Santa Barbara Airport. And I always say we partner. We never want to be a vendor, we want to be a partner, and we definitely feel that way with Santa Barbara Airport. Hilltech Marketing Group is based in Sacramento. We've worked with Sacramento International Airport and their Department of Airports for about 8 years now, have spent a lot of time in the travel and tourism industry, and also working with Amtrak. So I loved hearing about the changes and updates at the Pacific Surfliner, because I actually rebranded that from the San Diegans. So people who've been around here a while remember that. So always excited to hear that we're connecting folks to the airport in easier ways. Chris Vargas is our media director, and we are just delighted to be here. We really were happy to partner with Blaze on this business because of their strong connection to the media in this market. They're so entrenched in this community, and we felt that was critical to bring our aviation expertise with that real community connection so we could just make the program sing. So with that, I'll dive into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start by talking about the goals that were set by the airport, just remind everyone what we're working towards every single day. Share with you our objectives. Every plan has to have some objectives so you know what you're being measured by. The target audience, who are we going after every single day? And then we'll get into the fun stuff, the strategies and tactics we went through in the last year to really generate results for SBA. And then I just have a brief slide on moving forward, because we are knee deep in planning for this coming fiscal year that starts in just about a week. So the marketing goals, I won't go too deep into this. These are in the 2-year strategic marketing plan that was developed by the SBA team. But when we started working with the airport, we all came together in the conference room down the hall, and we said, okay, we need to start defining some roles and responsibilities. Actually, I guess it would be just some roles and responsibilities. So we know exactly how we're going to tackle these, because there's some big tasks in front of us. So we said, okay, the Hilltech Marketing Group, we're going to focus on establishing the airport as a unique community asset and economic driver. We can do that through messaging. Marketing investments demonstrably result in conversions and departures from SBA. Chris is going to talk about that today. We have some exciting information on how we've added some things to your media plan that really do have reportable results, and we can even talk to you a little bit about ROI. And we also would work with the group in building the social community of at least 5,000 local residents who are engaging with SBA. Blaze would work with the internal PR group to hit on goals 1, 3, of course, securing at least 50,000 in earned media publicity annually, and then also working on that social media. And then it's no surprise when we take a look at the internal staff, they are small but mighty, and they are tackling all 4 of these on a daily basis. From this, we were able to define our objectives. I always say, we have to have a roadmap, and we want to be measured at all times. So we did set these 2 goals. We want to position SBA as the airport of choice among residents in the primary catchment area. We'll monitor that based on passenger counts and anytime we can track leakage. So, and there are ways, obviously, we can purchase a leakage study through our consultant, but we also get some information through our media. And again, Chris will talk about that in a moment. We want to underscore SBA's role as an economic engine and marker of the fiscal vitality in the community. And that's something that we do through consistent messaging and curating that message in social media and in our media outreach. Our target audience for our advertising, you guys did a really fantastic in-depth economic impact study. I believe you partnered with UCSB on that. They did a really nice job taking a look at your current outbound passengers. It gave us a lot of insight into the people who are using your airport, and I have to say, it's not often you find such a robust picture of an audience that you're going after of the actual traveler in the airport. We have to pull together a lot of syndicated research to get that story. So kudos to the team who pulled that together. But we know on a daily basis, we are focusing on residents of the catchment area. 3564 is the sweet spot. They're educated folks with a higher income. What is interesting is your current passenger. In that survey, it showed a 62% were traveling for business, 25% for leisure. So that tells me we can do better on both fronts, but there's big opportunity with leisure. And there's all sorts of barriers and opportunities. So, and we talk about that a lot, but just to give you a sense kind of what goes on inside our head when we see these numbers. And it was pretty interesting to see that 67% of the passengers using the airport don't have children in their household. So all that just helps us paint a picture in our head, and we like to personify our audience and really understand who they are. Jumping into strategies and tactics. The very first thing we did, probably within a week of being awarded the business, was begin creative development. We needed to develop a creative campaign that communicated your key benefits and drove domestic bookings originating from SBA. We used the following key message: fly nonstop from Santa Barbara to 7 destinations and avoid the traffic and hassles of LA area airports to guide our creative strategy. That's a foundational statement. You would never see that exact sentence in body copy. You would never see it as a headline, but we want that to be the net takeaway for our audience. So with that, after we sat down with our creative director and art director and went through many versions, Depart Differently was born. We feel it's really rooted in the key differentiator of Santa Barbara. It is truly different than LAX, Burbank, SLO, Santa Maria. It doesn't matter if it's a big or a small airport. The experience is decidedly different in a really great way. Whether it's hassle-free, less traffic, the concierge-like experience once you're going through. What we need to do is just communicate that and remind people that they should depart differently. One of the first elements that we created was a TV spot for the KEYT TV buy. This also runs on YouTube and in our social channels. And if there's speakers on, perhaps we can hear it. If we can, could you tap play on that? Will that, if it, hopefully you can hear it. If you just, there we go. Thank you. So you'll see we really put some brand personality in there, 100% chill. We just wanted people to understand the real difference of flying out of Santa Barbara, always featuring the interior of the airport, that beautiful exterior. Of course, this spot can and will be updated with all the air service development that and growth that's been going on. But it's real simple to update that and make sure next year, next fiscal year, everyone sees all the new destinations. This campaign also includes print ads, and this ad is just a great example. You can see how we use the beautiful interior of the airport as a backdrop, and the headlines really bring Depart Differently to life. Prepare for a complete departure from the usual airport experience. It pretty much says it. Every single one of our pieces also includes a nod to the number of nonstop flights we have and the destinations we serve, because you know, Erin, when we first started talking about Santa Barbara, she would use the phrase muscle memory, and I thought it was so smart. People, you get in this habit. Santa Barbara doesn't have the nonstop flight I need. I'll go to LAX. And the answer is, yeah, we might have the nonstop flight you need, and we certainly have the one-stop flight you need. So we want to change that muscle memory and have people pique their interest and have them dig a little deeper. This is one of my favorite headlines we ran this year, and it was my favorite before I got the results from the digital campaign, and it's really my favorite now that I've seen the results. It is a competitive message, but it also hits on that relaxation. Don't LAX, relax. And of course, we're hitting on that nonstop and destination. Our other transit ad that was running this year, get the nonstops without the hassles. Just really straightforward, hitting on that hassle-free experience, again, using the backdrop of that beautiful terminal. Now, this is one thing I wanted to share with you briefly. It's a retail promotion that we deployed in late August and early September. You might recall Alaska Airlines upgauged the Seattle flight to a 737. So we wanted to, again, insert that SBA brand personality that's truly ours, more seats from SBA to SEA every yay. Because in advertising, we get to make up words. So next time I'll bring my creative director. He's got a lot of them. But Alaska Airlines gave us 2 free round-trip tickets to give away. So we did a paid promotion on Instagram and Facebook. It ran in the primary and secondary catchment. It was a 12-day contest with generating ultimately 127,000 impressions over 12 days, and so that was really exciting. 3,441 clicks to the contest page with 2,200 entries. We considered this campaign a huge success, also generating 806 new Facebook likes. Those are 806 new people who professed an interest in hearing from SBA on a regular basis in their social channels. So very exciting for us. And the 70 shares is really a strong engagement number. Additionally, the Blaze team worked with SBA to put together a news release announcing the upgauge and the contest. It was tremendous. All the major news outlets picked it up. They talked about it on TV. You know, when we look at the impressions, once it goes through all the pass along, we're at over 2.4 million. And if you wanted to put a rough ad equivalency together, people always like to see what if we had to buy that many impressions? It'd be almost $46,000. So really use that megaphone to get that message out there. Going into strategy 2, Chris is going to take you through our paid media program. And then Aaron will talk to you a little bit about the PR.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. So when we first started working with the airport, there were existing media contracts that were in place that totaled about $100,000. And so we worked collaboratively with airport staff and the existing media partnerships to develop a cohesive plan that not only accounted for all of those media commitments, but also allowed us to identify ways that we can incorporate some additional tactics, new ways to reach audiences that improved our targetability of the people that we wanted to reach, and also increased the visibility of the impact of the programs in the market. So when we think about in the context of this plan, there was a total spend of $135,000. $100,000 of those had already been committed to other media partnerships. So we had about $35,000 flex within the plan that HMG planned and made a formal recommendation for. So with that $35,000, we really felt like there was a huge opportunity for us to develop a digital media test program that would allow us to really reach a targeted group of active travel planners who were living in the primary catchment. With that $35,000, we deployed a 12-week media program that started in early February and ran through May 1st. The program was slated to deliver 6.4 million impressions. And again, the people that we were targeting with this program lived in the primary catchment area, and they were actively planning flyaway trips out of the Santa Barbara area. Once we identified these target audiences in the digital space, we started delivering digital display banners that were intended to drive them to the Santa Barbara Airport website homepage. A couple of the ways that we started identifying these audiences in the digital space were through more interest or action-based behaviors that they were performing online that would demonstrate that they were interested in a flyaway trip out of Santa Barbara. And those could have been anything from flight searches out of the Santa Barbara Airport or surrounding airports. So there was a competitive aspect of this as well. They might have been performing hotel or rental car searches in flyaway destinations. And then we were also retargeting to them and building awareness and consideration through frequency of messaging. And what that means is once they made it to the Santa Barbara website, there was a piece of code on the website that allowed us to follow them through their online journey, and we could remessage to them so that we can just deliver little reminders that we wanted to be in their consideration set. Now, throughout the digital test program, we were monitoring the audience delivery, so just impressions. How many people did we reach? How many times did we reach them? We were also looking at the engagement with our ads, which would be clicks or click-through rate. We also were able to look at their site engagement once they got to the Santa Barbara Airport website. So we were monitoring the number of pages that they were visiting. We were monitoring the amount of time that they were spending on the site. And we were also looking at the specific pages that they were visiting. As we were developing the parameters for this digital test, we really did this with a lot of intention and purpose, because we felt like if we were going to invest this money in a new digital program, we really wanted to utilize the data that we got back to measure the impact of our programs, and we also wanted to use the data to inform any future strategies. So some of the questions that we posed as we were putting the plan together were, how many people were exposed to our banners and then booked a flight? We're able to address that tonight. How far in advance are the passengers booking their travel? That's another thing we can address tonight. Which destinations are they searching for? And further, which ones are they booking? We're going to address that tonight. And then we've also gathered some additional demographic data on the passengers, which is not built into this presentation, but it will be used as we continue our planning. So this really started for us with choosing the right partner. So for this program, we partnered with a digital advertising network called Sojourn, which is an ad platform that specializes in travel and tourism path to purchase digital behaviors. So they maintain data sharing agreements with a long list of travel partners that include airlines, all of which fly out of Santa Barbara Airport, hotels throughout the world, online travel agencies like Expedia, car rental agencies, and so on and so forth. This is really important for us because, as we all know, the airport's model is a bit unique in that we don't sell anything. So all we're really trying to do is build consideration of us as the departing point, but we don't really have any of that commerce data that can qualify or quantify our efforts. A partnership with this partner has allowed us to do that, to really see that end-to-end visibility. So we're going to get into the weeds a little bit, so just stick with me for a second. So in order to capture the insights that we're going to be talking about, we had to place snippets of code on our website that really allowed us to glean some of these really valuable insights. We placed these little snippets of code throughout the website, but more specifically on specific pages that people are most likely to visit as they are considering all of their travel options. And some of those pages would be nonstop destinations, the airlines that serve SBA, the flight schedule, all of the parking options, all of the things that lead someone down the path of choosing the airport that they want to fly out of. So we got people into the homepage. They clicked on a series of web pages once they got to their website, and then a number of those people converted to ticketed passengers departing out of SBA on any flight. These pixels also allowed us to deploy that retargeting or that remessaging campaign that I talked about. So not only were they coming into the website, we were remessaging to them as they continued their online journey, so that we were building the consideration, because we know that there's a window between the time that they start the planning process and the time that they book. So we wanted to make sure that we were front and center throughout that entire journey. Now this chart is just basically showing a very standard user journey. So they came in through the homepage, they clicked on the websites, and then they became confirmed passengers. So I want to go through just some standard program deliveries first. This program delivered 6.4 million targeted impressions in the market in the primary catchment area. It resulted in 5,749 clicks to the website. As we looked at the differences between some of the people coming in through mobile devices versus those that were coming in through desktop machines, what we found was that people coming in through mobile, there were more of them, so it was the highest click volume coming from mobile devices. But when we looked at what people were doing relative to their entry, desktop audiences tended to be a more engaged travel planner. And this is really just to say that 64% of the visits to those key content pages, so nonstop destinations, the airlines that fly out of the airport, parking and whatnot, 64% of those visits to those pages came from a desktop audience. And on average, they spent more time on the website, and they visited more pages when they got to the website. This is a very normal phenomenon. What we find early in any exploration stage is that mobile plays a critical role in getting people to a website. And then as people get closer to the point of action, desktop becomes more prevalent. So this is very consistent with what we'd expect. Kim mentioned that we had a couple of different creative messages in the market. We were running them side by side in the digital program, and what we found was the "Don't LAX, relax" message was more likely to resonate with people living in the primary catchment. And we identified that trend by way of the click volume going to the website. 71% of the total clicks to the website resulted from engagement with the "Don't LAX, relax" message, and then 58%, or nearly 60%, of the visits to key content resulted from that primary message. So this is really just to say that the market responded very positively to that really direct competitive message. So now we can get into some of the campaign impact, some of those questions that we really wanted to answer as we were developing this test program. So during the campaign period, that 12-week campaign period, we identified 108,000, nearly 108,000 flight searches that included a flight out of the Santa Barbara airport. Of those 108,000 flight searches from Santa Barbara, 3,358 people who had been exposed to our messaging or clicked on an ad actually booked a flight out of Santa Barbara. That translated to nearly 6,000 tickets out of the Santa Barbara airport. So in order to sort of quantify what that means in terms of revenue back to our airline partners and indirectly to the airport, we looked at the average domestic ticket price using the Department of Transportation data. And they're saying that the average ticket price out of Santa Barbara is just about $520. When we multiply that number by the total number of people who booked a flight, that was $1.7 million in revenue, which is close to a $50 return on the ad spend. So we're very, very pleased with the amount of impact that this $35,000 program had in the market. One of the other questions that we wanted to understand was the difference between the travel planning window and the booking window. What we're seeing here is that there's a lot of search activity that starts more than 90 days prior to travel. That's the number at the very top of that chart. But the booking is more likely to happen 2 to 4 weeks prior to travel. Now, regardless of when that search window begins, what we know is that the amount of time that passes between the flight search and the actual flight booking is narrow. And in this case, it's about 3 days. And we're able to better understand that by looking at the median number of days that someone performs a flight search prior to their intended travel date. That's about 36 days. When you look at that in relation to flight bookings, the median number of days that someone books a flight prior to travel is 33. So this is just really a reminder that once someone begins that exploration, it's a very narrow window that we have to really convince them to choose SBA over the competitive set. Just as an extension to that previous slide, our campaign was running from early February to basically the end of April. That was a 12-week campaign, and the media that was running was really influencing travel decisions for the May timeframe. So this is one of those insights that we'll keep with us as we start thinking about the seasons that we want to influence travel for. In terms of the trip duration, this is very consistent with the current passenger makeup when you think about business versus leisure. The majority of the trips were 5 days or less. So probably no surprise when we think about just that 62% of business travelers versus the lower amount on leisure. And then finally, one of the key takeaways that we were able to glean from this test program were the cities that were searched for versus those that were confirmed. I think that one of the things that Kim and I were probably most surprised by were the search rank relative to the confirm rank on 3 key destinations, which were Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco. Those 3 destinations made it into the top 10 searched, but when you look at their confirmation rank, it's not commensurate. So this suggests that there is a fair amount of leakage that's occurring for those destinations. So just to keep a few key points that I've already shared with you, but I want to reinforce. Our 12-week digital campaign influenced the purchase of nearly 6,000 bookings from the Santa Barbara airport. The direct competitive messaging resonated with travel intenders living in the primary catchment area. The flight searches ramp up 60 to 70 days prior to travel, but once that planning begins, there's just a short window that we have to convince them to choose us. And then finally, again, the search to booking data suggests considerable leakage among some of our key nonstop destinations. All of these insights, of course, we'll keep in mind as we're continuing the planning for the next fiscal year. So I'd like to invite Erin up to take us through our public relations.
Thank you, Chris. my part will be pretty brief. My role with the marketing team is a bit smaller, but for Blaze and for Davies Public Affairs, is our parent company, this is more of a community pride relationship. We really wanted to be part of the airport's efforts because we use the airport a lot and we root for the airport, and it's been part of our community for years, so we're really proud to be part of this team. To talk about some of our public relations strategies, it was just really to continue to spotlight the airport announcements, including new carriers, routes, renovations, and awards. And this media market is really receptive to everything that the airport puts out, which is really positive. I think there's a really good relationship we have with the local media and media outlets. Leveraging data and beneficial economic impacts of SBA. As Kim mentioned, the community really looks to the airport as a important marker for the health and vitality of the community from a financial standpoint. So media is very receptive to getting that kind of information. And then really identify, I think this is a way that we can continue to expand upon the relationship from a PR perspective, is just really identify ways proactively to quantify the ease in travel in and out of the airport. Time in line, I think, would be an interesting analysis that we could start doing to really showcase the difference between LAX travel and SBA travel. And then convey the aspirational concierge-like experiences, really showcasing the airport as step one in starting your trip as part of the journey itself, and having that value as part of that. The other thing, being local, we're able to sort of monitor chatter and rumors, and we've been able to do that as it relates back to the debris flow and the fires. We saw some things that were happening online and in the media that we thought we could proactively address from the airport standpoint, and I think that was helpful. Here's some of the press releases that we created with the team. And you know, it's not just pushing information out there, it's really being strategic as to how we say the things that we say. You know, with the new carrier announcements, it was really more about talking about the options of pricing and versus, you know, the destinations. We really wanted to talk more about what the impacts for pricing and options for pricing for passengers. And I think the team really worked well in identifying those strategies. And then this is just an example of those 5 press releases. This is sort of the coverage garnered from those. So we had the Alaska 737 announcement. Pretty much every outlet in the community covered that. Same with the TSA PreCheck. It was a little bit more logistical. We had a PreCheck van in the community for a period of time, getting people pre-approved for PreCheck, and we got a lot of coverage on something as simple as that. The SBA Service Awards, which were a pretty big deal considering our little airport won major service awards from 2 major carriers. The media responded really positively to that. In fact, the comments were really positive to that as well. Runway rehabilitation project and the Frontier Airlines announcement yielded a lot of coverage. This this estimated advertising value, we see it around $62,000 of earned media value. Just having that coverage would be the equivalent of paying $62,000 in advertising. And you get a multiplier on that just because of the perceived value of earned media and the third-party endorsement factor. And last slide, there's some examples of some of the coverage of all the different efforts that we did there. Thank you.
Great. Well, we'll just wrap it up with a quick peek at how our social media is done, and then one slide on what we're looking at going forward. So you guys, you'll recall in the goals, the goal was to push us up to 5,000 engaged social followers by 2019. We focused on using your owned media channels, social channels, to reinforce the ease of use, proximity, and nonstop flights. So that's, we want to increase followers, but we also wanted purpose behind that. So just June over June, so that obviously precedes us joining the team by just a couple weeks. We're up over 1,000 followers on Facebook. We're up 200 on Instagram, and that actually is an impressive number because Instagram, for those of you, I'm sure you know you all are using Instagram regularly. I know. Anybody who has a 15 or 16-year-old or even a 25-year-old knows about Instagram. But there's not really a share function. You can't show your friends what you're liking, you know. So the virality is not as strong. So that's a really impressive growth as we've moved along. Just to give you a quick snapshot of some of the social posts, we Blaze early on took on the social and really manifesting the brand in these channels, and I think they did a tremendous job. We always talk about it, social media, looking at it particularly for an airport: inform, inspire, engage. The purpose of social media is to keep our followers informed about what's going on at the airport, inspired to travel, and we always would love it if engage it happened as well, meaning we're having a two-way conversation with them. So there's travel inspiration, destination information, and of course we're always sharing fare sales when they come along. And then we can monitor that engagement. So they really got our footing under us in the first half of the year, and then January we turned that back over to airport staff, and there's been nice momentum as we've gone forward. So last thing, I just wanted to let you know, as we've mentioned, we are currently in the planning process. Things we're focused on is elevating expectations of our vendors. I think you saw with Chris's presentation, when we can get that kind of data, we want to make sure that we're tracking, even if it's a so-called awareness vehicle, how can we track that better? How can we do something more imaginative with our partners? And tomorrow, Lynn and Deanna and Chris and I will spend our entire day doing just that, talking with media vendors right here at the airport at our media day. We're rotating folks in for quick meetings, able to talk to them about their proposals for the airport, and collectively as a group evaluate that and decide what is the best go forward plan for the airport for this fiscal year. We anticipate to continue to leverage our new campaign to part differently, and we will maintain the media outreach momentum. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a question about that 50-to-1 ratio of advertising to return. And if the $50 is ticket price, what portion of that ticket price does the airport actually realize?
Well, that would just be based on your CPE. So, I mean, it's probably not a apples to apples. It's directional.
Yes, I would say so. The airport would realize passenger facility charge revenue from that $500 or $520. So we would get a passenger facility charge revenue from that. And the other revenue that would generate would be in our like revenue for restaurant and parking and gift shop purchases. So I'm not sure that there's an apples to apples blending there.
No, and I think that the part of the reason we show that metric, it's number one, it's the metric we can get because it hits the airline's bottom line. But we talk a lot about what's the information we can relay to our airline partners, proving to them that we're generating business out of SBA on their brands, and then on their planes, and then hopefully let that be the seed to further air service conversation. So I think that's probably, I would look at that as more of a broad stroke. I think it tells us directionally our program was a success, but there's just, because we don't sell anything, there's no way to say this is exactly how much money it made. So
Yeah, well, it's an impressive ratio. But what we net is some small portion of that.
Oh, yes.
And so long as what we net is above $1, it's a good investment.
Correct. And we always obviously are watching those passenger counts, and as long as that line continues to grow, and we know there's a lot of factors that go into growing passengers and also pulling back on passengers. So we're always kind of watching all the levers.
Thank you.
Phew. I was trying to keep up.
I know, it's a lot.
So I have one of those 15-year-olds.
Okay.
And we flew out of Santa Barbara a few weeks ago to New York because bringing a 15-year-old to Fifth Avenue in New York is the stupidest thing in the world to do. And I'm still recovering from that.
We should have talked before. I could have warned you about that.
But at any rate, she took a picture as we're going down the jet bridge, and that directly hit and posted it on Instagram. And that directly hits to, I think the campaign of starting, the start of this journey, the vacation didn't happen when I got to where we were going. It happened when we were walking down the jet bridge. So I think that's really on point.
Also, the fact that our jet bridges are unique.
Really cool, yeah.
Because there are very,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
very few, if any, other places in the U.S. that have
3 to be precise.
Glass.
I
I've
believe the answer
I've
is.
never seen them. They're
Yeah,
And-
3, and I've
incredible.
been in all 3 of those airports.
What are they?
Impressions to clicks.
Mhm.
What? I feel like I should know this with teenagers. What's an impression?
Impression is an eyeball seeing the ad.
And how do we measure that? Because
So-
to see the ad, they had to go someplace.
Well, it's in that case, it's a hover or it's the website telling us, and tell me if I'm misspeaking, but it's in a mobile ad. It's the ad fully loading in front of the person's eyes. They didn't click out of it too quickly.
Got it. Okay, so that's an impression. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other side of that ratio was clicks to the
Yeah.
SBA website. So I have a follow-up to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a statement. The question is coming. Your firm handles Sacramento.
Yes,
Do you handle any other airports?
we do not.
Is the data you've collected from this test campaign, how does that compare? Obviously, a very different market, different size airport, but you know, if you normalize that, how does this data compare? How would you compare any of the ratio of impressions to clicks? Again, normalizing the data.
Yeah, so the ratio of clicks to impressions was very commensurate with what we see in other campaigns. What we were most impressed by was the conversion rate of the number of searches that occurred out of the airport relative to the number of tickets that were booked departing the airport. In other campaigns, we've seen about between a 3 and a 3.25% conversion. In this scenario, it was more than 5.5%. So
So that would seem to drive to the point that there's market here that we weren't making aware of of what they have available, and we've reached them. That would seem to
Correct.
be one possible.
And it's a new vehicle, so I think that speaks to adding a new vehicle to the mix.
Right. And then as a follow-up to that, I mean, so that at the end of the day, as was just pointed out, and I don't view this as a negative at all, the dollar per whatever that measurement was that was attractive, the bottom line is that the bulk of that money is going to the airlines, and that's good for the airlines, and that's what makes them want to. That's a good thing, though. That's what makes them want to fly in and out of here because they're making more revenue. So we're doing a great job for the airlines, which certainly benefits us. Do they participate? One other airport, I suppose, is a small sample, but the better and more effective we do at this and create that draw and that activity and that recognition of Alaska and United and American, et cetera, there's certainly a pull for them. So do we get them to, do we just use that as a, hey guys, look at all the stuff we're doing, or can we get some financial help to, no way, huh? That's just not gonna happen.
We wish.
I think it's the opposite. Airlines stopped doing a lot of local marketing and promotions back
They
in
just
the
put
early
it on us.
90s
Right,
and
yeah.
put the burden on the airport to do it.
And in fact, what we see, if I could, we see and we were talking about this just yesterday on the phone. Some of our airline partners will even, market a fire sale out of LAX to Seattle in this market. I'm not talking about any carrier in particular. Because our planes are full. I mean, we have nice full planes, and we see that, we see that in Sacramento. I mean, I get served an Oakland fare on Southwest Airlines online, and I'm right there in Sacramento, 8 miles from the airport. So, the airline's job is filling planes, and if they feel that you're anywhere within the catchment, they'll market to you.
That's good for
So
them.
but I will say the airlines with Santa Barbara are really great partners. I mean, when we wanted tickets, they said yes. They're excited to support when they upgauge. They're excited to support it. They're not going to just put an aircraft here and walk away.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question. And I did make the choice. I had the choice of going out of LAX nonstop to Newark, or Santa Barbara. I think it was Denver or Chicago. Do we fly to Chicago?
No.
So
No, Denver.
Used
that'd
to.
be handy. To New York.
It was popular on the list.
To avoid, to relax versus lax. So I lost my question here. So of all, and you know, the great thing about digital media is, you know, you just read lots of data to digest, and you can easily make mistakes in thinking the data is telling you one thing, so you have to correlate it. But from everything you presented and all the data behind this that you didn't present that probably would have sent some of us to sleep, was there a big aha, like, wow, this, you know, this is a huge takeaway from this? Not that you wouldn't have expected, but just a huge important takeaway. Blaring warning signs, flashlight, you know, spotlights. Was there one or more of those?
I think, you know, for us, it was the conversion. I mean, how receptive the audience was. Once we said, hey, this is here for you, they said, okay, I'll book it. I mean, to the tune of 2 points higher than what we see with other clients. And I think it was also that destination list with the leakage story on some of our nonstop flights.
Right.
It was probably just more instructive from a business planning perspective.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Madam Chair?
Question, do we have any information, and this may be in the director's report on our passenger count, but what the influence of the 737 being here, which is a, quote, big airplane, and how well Alaska's filling it, or is this a case of, I think they were running 2 flights before and they went down to 1 with a bigger plane, and of course, hopefully impressing them with the fill rate.
Alaska, just on your, hopefully you have that sheet before you, just in the month of May, they were up 40% over the same month last year.
And that's because of the 737. Last year,
And I understand they are working diligently to fill every seat out of Santa Barbara. And as Kim's report just showed, there's still leakage to Seattle and Portland that we're not capturing yet, which we share that information with Alaska Airlines in the hopes that they can add additional aircraft. And they think about it generally in a seasonal manner to add extra service. But yeah, they're doing extremely well.
And then my follow-on question is, what's the runway repair with cutting out the late night flights doing to depress the traffic? And what do we expect it to rise to when the runway's back full time?
The only airline that was impacted with the closures for the reconstruction was United. But if you'll notice, United was up 15% in May. So once again, they made accommodations for that, and we didn't see, we really haven't seen an impact from that construction project.
Do we think the rate at which they are progressing will possibly, like Highway 101 south of Big Sur, foretell a sooner completion?
A sooner completion for construction?
Of the runway project, that we will have it back for after 10 o'clock at night sooner than they're forecasting September?
I think we're through with the 10 o'clock at night, and we're doing midnight at this point, and because we're doing grooving and marking at this point.
Great.
I'm sorry.
Are the airlines aware of that such that they could resume their later flights?
Yes, they were briefed, and we coordinated with the airlines actually last summer when we first undertook the project, and then again in the springtime before we started.
So it was planned that the 10 o'clock would move to midnight so
Yes.
far into the project?
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, it was.
The competitive ad, don't LAX relax, who exactly came up with that?
My creative director on my team.
And
He's
what
not
was
here
that
today.
person's name?
His name is Eric Warden.
Please tell Eric Warden that is awesome.
I will.
One of the items you had there was time in line, I think it was. And I'll just throw out a little info which I've reported on twice before, which Hazel can see what I'm going to say. Back here a few months ago, on 1 month, and then the subsequent, I had friends visiting. And so I drove them over to the airport. I happen to live very close. It's a 10-minute drive. But I dropped them off at the curb, said goodbye, and looked at my watch and said, text me when you're sitting in the departure lounge. 12 minutes for one, 13 minutes for the other one. And if you take that kind of number and maybe get the furthest place in Santa Barbara, which is probably a 20-minute drive to the airport, and then compare that, you're probably not past Carpinteria on your way to LAX. And if you're in LAX, you're lucky if you're standing in line to check in by that time frame. So I certainly think that time in line, I wouldn't dream of going to LAX to take a flight with that kind of difference. And that seems to me to be pretty consistent as to how long it takes to get through check-in and security here.
Hopefully
is
that'll
where
be
we-
part of the new ad program.
Yeah. And this is where we've done this before, where we generate data to promote, where rather than waiting for data to promote, we generate it. So that could be an opportunity to actually do some tests in terms of time in line and announce that, because I do think I'm a mother, and this is how I want to always bookend my travel. I want to go in and come, start with SBA and end with SBA, and I love the TSA line and the regular line. We're all going in at the very same. It's amazing. The ease is so amazing. So if we can convey that. Quantitatively and announce that. Media loves those kind of metrics, and they'll probably run with it.
Yes, what I was visualizing is a map of Santa Barbara to LAX, and the dot would be in Carpinteria, and you'd be sitting there sipping your coffee you got from the coffee shop, relaxing, or you'd be in Carpinteria fighting the traffic to get to LAX, to fight the parking, to get into the terminal to fight the crowds, to get into the TSA line to fight getting through that. So-
I can envision a sort of a stop action with a clock running, showing walking, checking in, TSA, sitting down.
A
Boom.
bunch of marketing.
13 minutes.
An
We all
amazing
want to
race.
be in marketing.
Yeah,
Right.
it'd be an amazing race, but ours would take a few minutes.
Yes.
But yes,
I think it'd be fun. Well, and I think honestly, there's a fun social promotion that's brewing in my head about encouraging people to do an Instagram story. We did some videos in the past that took people to the TSA. We were showing people how to get from the parking lot into Concourse A at Sacramento, and we took them up the escalator, and then we had to go. You can't see here because you can't video in TSA. And then we came out, but it was but it's really quick. And it was and then we took them over to the other side. But it's a fun way, and people are very receptive to that. It's very viral. So, any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to partner with the airport. We are having a blast, and can't wait for the next year.
Well done. Thank you. And that brings us to item 11, the director's report.
Yes, indeed. Since we've already discussed our passenger traffic, which is very robust for May, which was before summer, before June should be equally as good, I anticipate. Reminder of the new flights that begin in August. And speaking of marketing, Visit Santa Barbara is developing a marketing program for the destination in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and also in Denver, while Deanna and Hilchek will be working on the marketing for the local area to do that, to promote that new service. And I heard just yesterday from our consultant that Sun Country already had a 20% load factor for the departures in August. So the word's getting out, and we haven't even advertised yet much. One last thing I wanted to bring to your attention, the FAA has an annual conference where they share updated information with airports and on a variety of their program elements. And we were quite surprised that the airport received an award from the FAA for its 2018 Outstanding Airport Award. And the award is granted in recognition of the exemplary work done by the City of Santa Barbara Airport Department in proactively completing runway incursion mitigation projects, its outstanding performance on Airport Improvement Program grants, and its cooperative relationship with the LA Airports District Office. So we were very pleased to receive that, and certainly the work that our engineers do, our planners do, our accounting office, we know that those grants are extremely important to the infrastructure of this airport, and working with FAA has just been very beneficial. So it was nice to be recognized, for sure.
Well, congratulations to you and staff and all the supporting staff, and give them our best and tell them we're delighted and very proud.
I'll do it. And unless you have other questions on the report, that concludes my report.
Was that a complete surprise?
Yes, it was. The one thing that FAA recognizes Santa Barbara over the years has been that we do a lot of work before a project is submitted to FAA to make sure that we have the environmental documents already done and are capable of doing the design and permitting for a project, which FAA will reimburse us for, but we have the funds to get it designed and permitted. So we really have shovel-ready projects.
So you give them a clean package
and then they just give us the money and we do the construction, which another project this summer that's going to happen will be the ramp reconstruction, or apron, I can't remember which way we do that these days, at 495 South Fairview. So we'll be doing a major portion of ramp reconstruction this summer, which will certainly improve the utilization of that property.
Great.
Thanks.
I noticed a number of large trucks out here just near Signature, near the fuel farm. Is that the generators? Is that associated with the generators?
I'll turn it over to either Aaron or Jeff to respond.
So those are actually the groovers that they're putting the quarter-inch grooves into the paper.
Ah,
on the
okay.
runway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll hope for some rain that will make it necessary for the grooves to do their job.
To use the grooves.
Okay. Any other questions, business? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
The design of the terminal, I think.
It was prior to the design of the terminal, actually. We do have a contractor that is working on the project. They've submitted for design review, have also been to ABR one time with their kind of preliminary design. And they're also working to extend the California Solar Initiative incentives that'll help finance part of the project, just a small part. But that's where they are. They're still working on the design, kind of the overall design of the system and how the system's going to look. So that's where they are.
So with that, unless there are other questions, that concludes my report.
I would like to thank your social media folks for getting the Fly Differently or Depart Differently commercial posted up there on
So you could see
YouTube
it.
and Facebook, so we didn't have to spend our day watching for that commercial to pop up.
I have, Hazel, I have a couple of questions on 495. So there was a settlement, so I presume then there was litigation prior to that? Or
Potential litigation.
potential litigation, okay. And so as part of that settlement, I know that facility is still operating on, or some part of it on temporary power. How did that wind up getting sorted out, or did it?
The airport is, in order to protect our reversionary interest, thank you. The airport is undertaking the replacement of the switchgear and the electrical system. That has been underway for a couple of months now, and it too is getting ready to go out to bid. But because it is in the floodway, not the floodplain, but the floodway, we're building a structure to get it up out of the floodway, so it'll be up at least, I think he said almost 4 feet. And have a new electrical switchgear, and we were working with Smith Electric, Southern California Edison, and we'll be going to City Council to use policy reserves in our capital fund for that project, which is estimated to be around maybe $450,000.
That was going to be my very next question, is that I don't recall us having that budgeted anywhere, so.
Additionally, we're also doing core samples of the ramp because in our AIP grant application for next year, we do have some monies identified for 3 projects, actually. One is to replace one of the ARF vehicles. Another is to replace our security access control system. And then the third one would be to begin replacing ramp in the northeast quadrant of the airport. So the northeast quadrant is pretty much that particular ramp. There has been some questions, too, as to why the airport didn't repair the ramp in the past. And back in 1963, I believe it was, there was an amendment to the original agreement with Aerospace Lines that said that if they wanted it to be exclusive use, then the responsibility for the maintenance and the upkeep of the ramp would stay with that tenant. And they chose to do that. So it's always been exclusive. It's never been a public ramp until now. And so now we're going to get it and repair it.
Do we have on the electric, I mean, the ramp, that's a long-term thing, I'm sure, in bits and pieces. Bits and pieces, yeah. The electric, which is probably inconvenient for the folks over there, nonetheless, is FedEx, who's about to enjoy their busiest time of the year. That's not a short-term project. I mean, is that will that begin before this 5/19/2018 date, or?
Hopefully, we will have the design, and I don't know, Jeff, if you can echo in here. I think the design gets done, and then it takes 4 to 5 months to build the switchgear. Is that right?
Right, it's custom design and will have to be custom constructed, so 4 to 5 month lead time on just the switchgear.
Okay.
So we really don't anticipate having the power back up in May.
Understood.
It could be longer than that.
Yeah, understood. How is the temporary power worked over there? I mean, is it stayed up? I mean,
I understand that there are 2 tenants that have generators, and they rotate them out and keep them going.
We certainly want to keep FedEx happy.
Well, FedEx and Georgetown Management has the other one, too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, is that not an issue with the Air Pollution Control District?
I
there's
believe
such-
they have permits.
I
Do
see.
they?
If the units are portable units, they can run as many hours as they need to.
Is that right? Oh. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else have any questions? All right, then with that, it's been a long night. We're adjourned.
Thank you.